Good morning to the DME for Peace community, and welcome to this week's edition of the M&E Thursday Talk series on DME for Peace. The Thursday Talks are made possible by the Carnegie Corporation of New York through the Peacebuilding Evaluation Consortium. My name is Jack Farrell, and I am the DME for Peace project manager at Search for Common Ground. Today, I am absolutely delighted to welcome Eric Meerkamper, the Global Head of Citizen Engagement at RIWI, to lead a discussion on creating opportunities for accessing global citizen opinion. RIWI are working with Search for Common Ground on the human rights support mechanism through Freedom House, and we're excited to welcome them here today. As a reminder, we will be opening up the presentation to questions and answers once Eric has finished speaking. Please feel free to type your question as it arises so we can jump right in to start today's discussion. I will now hand it over to Eric. Eric, you're very welcome to the Thursday Talks. The floor is all yours.
Great, thanks, Jack. That's awesome. And hello to everybody, wherever you might be listening in from. It is definitely a pleasure for us to be talking today, and for many reasons. But one reason is that when this technology was developed about 7-8 years ago now, with work primarily at the University of Toronto, and it was really looking at new ways of engaging citizens around the world on important issues. A lot of it was initially on pandemic research and trying to reach real people around the world to understand what they think. And I think when we talk about peace building and peacemaking, very much the idea of the belief that I think if we can help people understand each other and know what they think, that understanding is the basis for all of this. So thank you very much. It is a pleasure. I'll talk a little bit about what we have done, a little bit about our technology, which is quite unique, and then just some ideas of ways it has been applied or could be applied for design, monitoring, evaluation, and others. And then, a Q&A. This is all exciting, and some of this stuff is quite new too, so no one has all the answers. So any questions you have are really, really valuable. So as I mentioned, Eric Meerkamper with RIWI. We're based in Toronto, Canada, though we work sort of everywhere. And I'll explain how our technology works, but to date we've worked in every country in the world, 51 languages, and over 100 million completed surveys. So thinking about us as a global survey technology. But before I get into that, I did want to say something quickly just around, this is an interesting quote I love from Bill Gates, and really this is what we're seeing from our donors as well. Increasingly, this idea of measurement, this idea of being able to inform decisions on data, citizen data, is really the core to what we're all trying to do, and increasingly is possible. In the past, it was very difficult. It was very costly to go out and do certain types of, or take a long time to do pre and post evaluation. And now we're finding that there is the potential to really engage people. And I guess I sometimes speak to it as a new era of global citizen voice. And people are sharing their ideas. They are willing to engage and want to engage, and in new ways. Maybe not through the traditional 1-hour face-to-face survey or on the phone at dinner, but really in different ways of using technology to get their voice out there. And that's really what we're tapping into. Quick background on what we do. And when you hear a technology, you might think, wow, that's really unique and different, and it is the only one. But we have been doing this for a while. We've done over 100 million surveys. We work, as you can see here, with some very major organizations, funders, as well as different groups, Freedom House, and we have ongoing relationships with a number of these that you probably know, focusing often on really sensitive issues. Like with ILGA, we do the world's largest LGBTI study of about 100,000 people every year. I won't go into detail on all of these because we don't have so much time. But just so you know, they really have worked on a variety of things with major organizations. And some of the types of themes that we've worked on, you can see, is quite diverse because essentially we have a new way of asking people, of engaging people. So the topics can be a variety of things. Obviously, directly related to peace or conflict. But these are all things that we have done, from work on open government to, like I mentioned, LGBTI rights, to corruption work with the World Bank in Kenya and in India, infrastructure for the Inter-American Development Bank, a variety of different things. And we know, of course, that underlying a lot of issues, conflict issues, are economic drivers as well. And how do we understand understand those as we're trying to build connections between people? For example, rebuilding after the war in Iraq, looking at the role of the private sector and the public sector, another project that we have worked on. So anyways, just to give a sense that right now we have the opportunity to ask the world and ask people just about anything. So let me talk just a little bit about the technology, and it seems that this group is more technology excited type of people, which is great. But I can talk more about this afterwards. But just to keep it simple, the technology that's been developed is called random domain intercept technology. But think of it almost as a new way, a new type of global telephone in a way, but it leverages the internet. So essentially what happens is that people, when they're browsing on any device, and you might have done this in the past, you have entered in some sort of an address, www whichever, or you've clicked on a link and it comes up as saying this page does not exist, or there's an error or something. What we have done is we actually are able to access those otherwise dead ends. And instead, when someone arrives there, they will get a survey, which they can decide to answer or not. These are short surveys, usually about 15 questions, maybe 10 questions, quite rapid, takes 2 or 3 minutes. I'll show you some examples of how the surveys look. But the idea is to access as many people as possible, to access not just those who are paid respondents who sign up for panels to do that. And I'll talk a little bit about the strengths and limitations of this. So essentially people will land on a site. We can geo-target, so it can be in any one country or even any city in their language. As I mentioned, we've done it in 51 or so languages. They complete the survey if they wish, and then we capture the data in an interactive dashboard. And this happens very quickly. So we can launch survey within 24 hours. We're starting to get data hours after that. And depending on the size of the country and such, we're able to get thousands of respondents in a very short period of time. Again, I'll move forward on that, but people have questions on technology, please to answer those as we go forward. But just quickly, some of the considerations when using this technology, sort of advantages and some limitations for it. First of all, it is the internet population, so we can get anyone in the world who is on the internet potentially could respond to this. So the non-internet population, we can't get, not directly at least. That, of course, is now well over 50% of the world's population. It's growing, and we've done it in every country, so we know more or less who we can get and where they are. One of the advantages of this approach is that the respondents are completely anonymous and safe. So we work in some particularly difficult countries. We work in conflict zones in ways whereby it'd be very dangerous to the respondent and to the interviewer, possibly, if you were asking certain questions or they were to respond, and they would have to be identified to be able to do that. So the anonymity is really important. It's also the mechanism is actually a randomized, that's been proven. So from a statistical point of view, the error mechanism that people see or use to see our surveys is randomized, which allows us to extrapolate to broader populations. I'll show you a bit about, it's rapid and scalable in terms of, thousands of respondents. We did a project in Iran with the government of Canada where we did about 20,000 respondents in Iran in about 12 days. And every country, every language, every device, and we can geo-target certain communities as well. I'll give you an example of this thing, what things look like. So it would be the whole screen. This we just did for Freedom House, for example, using images. These questions are very of course, it would be in whatever language. So if we know what country they're in, we will deliver it in that language. Again, these are sort of single-click questions. This, for example, is the LGBT work we do. These are just English examples. Of course, we do it in many languages. We try and keep it short as much as possible. We work in, when I look at scale, for example, this is an example that you can look yourself. It's aswat.me, so ASWAT.me, where we did a survey of 30,000 people across the Middle East, asking questions about impact women. Of course, it's in Arabic, not in English, but this is for this. This is the example of the question. One of the questions we asked is about 15 or so. This was asking about girls' access to education. But what's interesting is not only did we get 30,000 respondents, but then it was actually integrated into a dashboard. So some of the data, when you think about what you capture, can also, it itself can be a platform for discussion. So in this case, you can go into the website, say you are a man or woman of a certain age from a certain country, and see how the data is visualized. And I'd like to think, sometimes when we think of data, thinking of it as not just understanding people, and it's an asking tool is what we have, but it's also an engagement tool. And it's really the idea of using information to engage people versus just telling them what we believe or think they should do is really, I think, the future of civic engagement, and less, we can now leverage these technologies that increasingly people are using to do that. I won't go through this now, but you can go through this citizen.riwi.com after the call, and I'll just give you examples of what the type of questions can look like. Again, we've done over 100 million of these, so there's many, many versions, but I'll give you a sense of how this is. Think of it, like I like to think of this as the scalpel approach, the fine-tuned approach, versus the big sledgehammer, the 30-minute survey, lots of questions, complex, and keep it quick. So just a couple things I thought, well, we're talking to DME people, so here's some initial thoughts I had on how this type of technology can be applied. So from a design application point of view, one thing is very rapid concept and message testing. We're currently doing this with the World Bank right now, where I think we're on the 6th version of a series of questions that we will be running in 60 countries. Thinking about iterative design, increasingly these types of tools, so our tool, for example, is able to be integrated to help improve the design itself and get very rapid feedback within hours, within days. We work with the Omidyar network and have an ongoing relationship with them. They call it rapid cycle research, and which I love that name. It really is thinking about what is the future of how do you get responses from people. I'm just going through here. I just want to be conscious of our time here. So the other one for monitoring applications, opinion and awareness tracking, rapid baseline establishment. So now the ability to go in and understand where an issue sits in people's minds, both during or pre and during and after as well. And what's most important is the idea and ability to respond in just, while, and field. Because when I think about it, monitoring is not just a monitor, well, what's happened or what's happening, unless you're able to do something about it. And so having it's essentially live feedback, live data that's coming to you, that you can see what is happening, what is working or not, and allows to both pilot, put out something initial, get feedback, adjust, and go forward. This iterative research or rapid cycle research really is the future, and you guys are probably already doing that. And in the past, it was difficult. It would just take longer. It would cost a lot. So it didn't have the, let's call it, luxury to get those feedback loops. But now we do, and we can do this. The next thing is application just on engagement. So the other part of this is oh, sorry, I just wanted to look back. Oh, so yeah, evaluation, pre, during, post evaluations, and rapid response assessment. So if something is happening right now, to go in and get data back within 72 hours if possible. And then engagement, that's just the last piece, is to not only, like I mentioned, use this to understand people, but we can actually also use this to expose people to global campaigns. So the example I gave before about the Middle East study, not only did they use the data to create an interactive dashboard of about, with like 30,000 or so respondents, but we were then actually also, the third phase was to direct about 500,000 people to that website. And what's important about this is how are we engaging real people? How can we engage people that are otherwise not going to participate or we would never reach? Often there's a lot of citizen outreach, which is important and is great, but due to cost or other methodologies, it sometimes becomes the same people, the same already interested people who are providing their insights. How do we expand that to get a much broader global citizen voice? So I know it's kind of do it. So I know he says people have lots of questions, which is great, and I can give more examples for it. Of course, after this, please feel free, send me a note directly on your specific what you're looking at, and we have lots of examples on our website. If you go on, you'll see numbers of case studies, and we're more than willing to share those, if they're going to be valuable to you. So on that note, I'll let Jack take it over at this point.
Great. Thank you very much. Eric.
Yes.
I'm getting some background noise. I'm not sure where that's coming from. But yeah. Thank you for hosting. We're now going to open up to the Q&A. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Thursday format, we have two ways of which you can ask a question. The first way you can submit a question is through the question function on GoToWebinar. The second way you can submit a question is by clicking on the hand button to raise your hand, and we will unmute your microphone so you can ask your question live. When you do submit your question, we ask that you submit your name and affiliation. Just a note, these Thursday talks are recorded and posted on DME for Peace, so that those who are not able to join us today are able to sort of learn from our discussion and make sure that everyone is able to participate in this process. So with that, I'm going to jump into the first question. And the first question comes from Maya Regev. It says, thanks for sharing this. Do all surveys come through RDIT? Are there enough? I'm not sure if I understand that correctly. Maybe, Eric, you have some thoughts on this?
Yeah, are there enough? I guess maybe what you're asking, it was a great question, is the volumes. It depends on the country. So like I mentioned, in China, we did a study where we had about 6,000 respondents in about 20 hours. We did Ebola work in Liberia, and we were getting about 50 respondents a day. So it really is a function of the size of the population times the internet penetration. We've done it, so we already know what we can feasibly get by country. There is literally every country we can do it. It's just some will take longer, and we just can't get as many.
Great, thank you. The next question comes from Jesus Melendez, who said he's interested in the Iran project. If you could elaborate, how is it to work with a country with that level of censorship? The same would apply to a certain extent with Saudi Arabia.
Great question. So we work particularly in opaque countries. So we work in that and China and Russia and others. The issue for this is we actually don't work with the local governments. So we actually can directly access people through this mechanism, and it can't be blocked. The reason is actually the survey is running simultaneously on hundreds of thousands of these dead ends, depending, could be thousands depending on the country, and there's really nothing there. We're not actually in the country. People are actually, if you think about it, coming to us. For that reason, it's not like there's one website that the government can go to and monitor or shut down. It's there, people respond or not, it disappears. And there are we do work on security-related things in certain countries. So there's other protocols that we do, but that allows us a very unique way to access directly to people, and as I mentioned, safe for the respondent. So we work on LGBT work in Uganda, for example. They probably don't know this. The government may or may not afterwards, but usually we're in and out before anyone knows.
Thanks, Eric. I think that ties in with the next question quite well from Anne Feeney. So you said you work with opaque, work in countries with opaque governments. So Anne asks, in many countries people might not believe that their responses are actually anonymous. How do you reassure respondents that they are anonymous, that their data is safe?
Yeah, so actually what we do is we can say something in front at the beginning saying this is a survey, we'd like your opinion. We have found the best way to do it is to make it very easy for people to respond or not respond. Those who are going to be concerned just won't respond to it, and that's not a problem. We're not capturing any personal information. Saying, leaves the internet, like we could say, this is not the government, that probably would actually raise more red flags for people. We find, for example, in China, a lot of people who just know the internet generally is monitored, but they're still participating in many other ways. So we find that we get approximately, on average, 6 to 8% of the population will respond to a 12, 15 question survey. Actually, in North America or in Europe, it's more like 1 to 2%. But other ones, Ethiopia, the project I mentioned, we just did for Freedom House, I think we had about 12% there. China, we get about 7, 8%. So we're able to reach people. We can try and reassure them, but we just make it's very quick. They respond, and that's the way that has worked well so far.
Great. Thank you very much, Eric. I'm going to unmute Samuel Nanag's microphone. So I see you have your hand raised, Samuel. So feel free to ask your question now, if that is deliberate. Samuel? Okay. That obviously didn't work as well as we'd hoped. So we'll move on to the next question from Beth Hallowell of the American Friends Services Committee. And Beth says, what a great tool. How much does it cost, and how much support is available for things like question development, survey development?
Yeah, great. So the way it works is on survey development, again, these are relatively short, so they're 12, 15 questions. We work with our clients who will give us a draft, the questions. We will help optimize them, and that goes quite quickly. It's usually within about 24 hours. As we work more and more with our partners, they know, more or less the format that works. So yeah, we will do that. We program them. Clients use the test link before it goes live, and then it gets translated. We take care of all of that, and the data comes back in a full interactive website or a dashboard. So within usually about 48 hours, we have the dashboard set. You can look through. You can see what's coming back. If there's something going awry, like often we'll do a soft launch. If it's looking strange, we might say, hey, let's change question 3, or let's turn question 3. It turns into 2 different questions. So that it's very, I would say, it's very minimal in many ways from the client side once you have the ideas and the questions you want to do. In terms of cost, it's one of these things that does depend, of course, on the length of a survey, and if we're looking at more general population, so let's say people 16 plus, if you're looking for only a sub-segment of youth, say, we get a lot of youth, so it's actually very good for that. But let's say you're looking at a certain group that is maybe only 25% of the population, that can increase cost as well, just because we have to reach everybody and then filter for those. But we find generally, like if you do a 1,000, 2,000 person study in one country, it'd be in the $15,000 range. We often do like I mentioned, our LGBT project, we did it in I think 65 countries. it's not going to be 65 times that. We did the opening government project for the World Bank. That was also 62 countries. There's certain efficiencies, when we get multiple countries and such. But that's, on a one-off, that's what it looks like. We try and keep it very, there can be cost efficiencies. Below that, of course, if we're doing repeated modules or something. But that gives you a gut. But if you have more specifics, like people send me what you're kind of looking for, and then we can scope that out.
Great, thank you, Beth, and thank you, Eric. The next question comes from a great friend of DME for Peace, Bob Berg of Alliance for Peace Building. And Bob, I'm pretty sure, Eric, you just covered the first part of Bob's question where he asked for a ballpark for a national or global survey. But Bob gets a bit more specific, and he asks about geo-targeting, and asks how refined can you get with this technology? Can you get it to provincial level or smaller?
Yeah, so we can get quite refined. It depends a little bit on the country, but we usually can do it down to the city level, even sub-city level. So we did a project with the World Food Program in Port-au-Prince in Haiti, where we were only targeting people or surveying people in Port-au-Prince, and then we also knew what region within that where they were. It actually depends on the ISPs in the individual country on the granularity that we get. So most countries is pretty good. We will get more urban people just because that's the actual distribution of the internet, of course. But we can geo-target some countries. Kenya, for example, we actually have to ask people where they're located just because the way the ISP is tagged, everyone looks like they go through Nairobi, but that's just the way their infrastructure is set up. So that's how, if we can't get it automatically, we can ask people. And also we can change the surveys. So by district, for example, we did a survey, property rights index in India, 35,000 people in 24, I think, regions. Is that 24 provinces? And then within that, cities as well. But we will. The good thing about it too is we've done this so much. If whatever country it is, we can already provide in advance. This is what the geo distribution looks like, and whether that's sufficient or whether we have to probe further.
Great, thank you very much, Eric, and thank you, Bob, for your question. The next question comes from Laura Gagliardone, who says, "Thanks for the great presentation. My questions are the following: how do you retain citizens who have been engaged? Do you have a short-term and long-term strategy for engagement?"
Yeah, so this is a great question. We don't retain people ourselves because of the anonymity. For us, what's really important, because a lot of the issues we work on are very sensitive, we don't ask for personal information. When they come in, we don't know who they are. We'll ask general questions, age, gender, and such, but we don't have any personal contact information. One of the main reasons is we would never want, if the data for some reason was hacked, that it would get back, that certain person responded something. That's an issue with SMS and other approaches where, in order to incent someone, they have to go to a particular device, or they have to work through like the local communications technology company or the telco in order to reach people. So now what we have done is once we've surveyed people, we can direct them to something, a website, for example, an educational website or something, at which point they, if they choose, could engage in that. So that it might be something where you ask, would you like to hear more? And if so, they can then provide some of their personal information if it's safe and they're comfortable doing that. So we definitely can do that on the back part, but we don't go back and re-engage people over time, particularly from the safety point of view. The other is we want to get a fresh representation of the population every time. Otherwise, you're sort of recycling people who have already been exposed to things. But if you do need to engage them, there are ways to try and recruit them off the back end, as we would say, and that can work.
Great, thank you very much, Laura, for your question. And to you, Eric, the next question, I believe, comes from Sandra Naum. And Sandra asks, how do you ensure that you aren't getting responses outside of the country and the population you're targeting? For example, I just looked at aswat.me, and it looks like I could have completed the survey.
Yeah. So okay. So thank you. The aswat.me, that one is now the pub. Just so I understand, what you're seeing there is the public platform now for it. It really, yes, anyone can answer that survey there, but it's not affecting our data. So the data was already captured in a completely random, controlled way, and then that was uploaded to that website. Now that website isn't really a survey site; it's more of a citizen engagement site. But we can, yeah. I mean, there's certain technologies that when we know where people are generally. So it's only people that we can determine are in a certain country that would get a certain survey. That's why the aswap.me one is not good. A good example for that is not a real live survey, just like our demo surveys. It's open for anyone to respond to. But otherwise, and we can, again, even within a city or a country, if we know someone is from Rio versus Sao Paulo, we could have different surveys there based on that as well.
Great, thanks for your answer, Eric. The next question, I'm just going to raise or unmute Julian Egan's microphone. Julian, I see you've got your hand raised. Your mic is live if you want to ask a question.
Sure, thanks for that. So it's Julian Egan from International Alert in London. Thanks very much for the presentation. I was wondering, is it possible to actually access data from other people's surveys if it's going to be relevant to our work? Say, for example, if someone had done a survey on development and governance, there might be something relevant in there for a peace-building organisation like ours, although it may not be a specific question related to conflict. Is it possible to access that kind of data?
Yeah. So that will depend on a couple things. So one is there is work that we have done on our own that we can share. Where appropriate, of course. We also, with a lot of the organization that we work with, are probably some of the people are listening in right now, and we're all part of this community. So usually, I've been quite open to sharing components of what they do. As you know, is their information. So some reasons sometimes they will or won't. But yeah, we have a very large data set, and some of the questions, for example, like the basic demographic breakdown by country. That's stuff that what we already have. I'm actually just after this call talking again with the UN OCHA on and people like Flowminder or some of the others who are interested in these type of data sets that we'll be providing. Because again, if the last thing we don't want to do is replicate things. So there are potential for that. The best is just sort of say, hey, here's kind of the countries you're looking at or some of the issues. And if we have done something, we would just check with our partner. But often, yeah, they can share it. So that's definitely a resource that we'd love people to try and tap into.
Great. Thank you very much, Eric. And thank you, Julian, for asking your question live. It's always great to hear a third voice on the webinar. So the next question comes from Soraya Virgi, who I believe is a consultant based in Haiti. And Soraya asks, can you only ask closed questions in the survey?
So that's a great question. We do ask open questions, or we can ask them, but generally they're closed questions. I'll give you an example. We just did a project with the Inter-American Development Bank. We can send some of these links afterwards. It's on our website, but because there's 33,500 people across Latin America. It was primarily closed-ended. There was an open-end text at the end that we allowed people, if they want, to share their thoughts. And on that group, we got about 800, really interesting comments. So that people were, thoughts on the role of government, and it was around infrastructure spending and schools and hospitals and what's important to people. So we can definitely do it, but it's best to think of it as it's closed-ended. Click, 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 and then there's an opportunity to capture some comments as well.
Great, thanks, Eric. And the second question that Soraya has, and I think it's just slipped through, is Soraya wants to know, how do you target people that you want to get to a certain site? Is there a sampling method that you guys use, or is it just really just the the population of the internet in that given country?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I went over that only briefly, in how our methodology works. But yeah, our sampling is essentially the error mechanism. So it sounds kind of strange in a way. But it's essentially anyone on the internet has an equal probability of being exposed to a survey when we're targeting that in a certain country. Instead of thinking of a panel, we don't have a panel of recruited people that we will go to and who are paid or whichever. It is essentially the internet is our panel. So that's great. Our limitation is the internet. That's why we can't get the non-internet. So what we will do is, let's say for a certain country, we will just get the natural distribution, and then we will weight that data to census. And if you're data people, we usually deliver the data in SPSS or in Excel or in this interactive dashboard. So let's say in Pakistan, we'll probably get about 70% or so of the population will be male, 30% would be female, and you're also going to have a bit of a more of a skew younger. So we would just capture, let's say, 2,000-3,000 people, and then we would provide the raw data and then the weighted data, weighted to census. So we don't want to work to quota and start adjusting things. That introduces error. Ours is, and what's been proven is that error mechanism is a randomized behavior. So we know, just like random digit dialing, this random error, and this has been proven many times over. We have lots of, because of our academic background, many journals written on this, articles. The error mechanism is a randomized behavior. So that's our sampling frame, and then we filter. Or as people come in, if we only want to get young people, we can exit people who are older if necessary. But generally, we'd probably just survey everyone, and then in the post-analysis, we get all the data. You can start looking what are the patterns, comparing groups to groups. That's how we do it.
Great, thank you very much, Eric, for the detailed response. We've now.
Sorry, Jack, just lost you.
And a comment from Jesus Melendez, who says, "Normally faced with a more traditional enumerator survey." Another question, from a responsible data perspective, do you follow specific ethical, privacy, security, informed consent, etc., as standards and best practices?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, on ethics, that's critical to us. We, again, because of our background and work at the university, that's core. What's important, and what I said before is, because we have a completely anonymous approach, we don't capture personal information. And although we probably could try and do that, we prefer to just not even have to worry about having information that would be, personal in any way. We make it very easy for people to, if they wish to respond or not respond. We haven't gone out. We're not intercepting or hijacking people in any way. We're calling it intercept technology, but essentially is them coming to us. So they're coming to a site, which is in the internet somewhere, and at that point they are completely free to respond or not, to stop at any point. There's no personal information of them, from them. And that's a great question, because that's one of the biggest issues with the research industry now. Most research is increasingly trying to capture more and more personal information, cookie information, history information, so they can target the type of messaging or advertising or questions that they're asking people. It is a limitation for us that we don't have all that history, but we'd much rather exchange that and be, completely private and completely safe to the respondent than to start trying to capture personal information. So for us, it's a very different question, because we don't even have that information.
Great, thank you very much, Eric. I know we have a question from Molly Kelly of IRI, and Molly asks, although this may compromise the anonymity of the process, can a link to surveys be distributed through SMS?
Sorry, a link to, we wouldn't do that. It's possible, but if someone's going to distribute a link through SMS, they can just distribute it to their own survey. I don't, in our, they would just do it to some sort of I don't know, just a survey that they have running, because in our case, what we're providing is access to population that you wouldn't be able to reach, otherwise. Now, we can get people on all kinds of different devices, and in order to do that, distributed by SMS, by definition, they have to know who they are. So we wouldn't have access to those people. If, for example, we are running a survey and through our methodology, and then let's say an organization has a panel of people that they want to expose to that survey, then yeah, that wouldn't be a problem. We would almost have two surveys in parallel. There'd be one link and people could be sent to it and go through. But I would keep the data separate, because that second group are a different group of people. And it may be interesting. They may or may not actually respond differently. They might be very similar. But so we can distribute links in our methodology to drive people somewhere if needed. Ours isn't a link, it just shows up, but we could send them to another survey or an engagement or a messaging site. Or we could replicate, create a second link that you could send people to if there's another population who want to look. So that's possible. It's just a different sample of people. I hope I answered that clearly.
Yeah, I think you did a great job there, Eric. I know we've touched on quite a few of these questions, particularly around whether or not people can access the data available from previously administered surveys, and how can you ensure sort of adequate response. So I actually want to jump into a question from Sabateshi Minasi, who is from Ethiopia. And Sabateshi asks, thanks for the presentation. My question is, how different are your outputs compared to other surveys, for example, from the government or more centralized surveys?
In terms of the outputs, like how the data is delivered, if that's the question, or is it? I'm not sure. Is it maybe how?
Yeah, I think it comes down to like level of responses and engagement with the survey compared to like the general surveys that like a government might send out.
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to compare because there's so many different things that people do. I mean, in our case, what we do find is we get a much broader distribution of population, right? So we do get a bigger group versus other ones which are panel-based have generally a certain group of people, older somewhat. For example, we get more younger people, young males who usually don't participate in a lot of these things, which is a critical group for countering violent extremism and other issues, conflict issues. So we actually are very good about getting young males. In terms of the responses, one thing that is important is something which is really the response bias that can be related to we call it social desirability response bias. So that in our case, because it's anonymous, you can find different responses versus ones where someone's self-identified. Not just that it's dangerous, I already mentioned that situation where we couldn't even ask those questions, but I'll give you an example. In Ireland, actually, when we did work on same-sex marriage, and Jack, I mentioned this to you last time, I think, traditional polling about a year in advance was showing about a 70% support for same-sex marriage. Our data was showing a 52%. And at first we thought, wow, we're way off. But we were working with people locally there, and after a year of really hard work on the ground, it turns out that the vote, I think it was 60%, 61%. And so what we had found is that we probably were measuring what people really thought. But when someone calls you at dinner and say, do you support this or not, you sometimes think, well, I don't know, do I really want to share this? They know who I am now. I don't know. So that social desirability bias can be quite important. Imagine if you ask someone a question about government or whichever, and the person, face to face, they're thinking, what's the right answer here? Why should I tell you? This should be a concern. So for that piece, I think why, particularly for sensitive issues, we believe this is a safer and hopefully better and more honest way for people to respond freely.
Eric, thank you very much. We have a couple more questions. I just want to ask one more, even though we've hit time, if that's okay, because I think it's a pretty good one to finish up on. And this comes from Laura McGrew, who's an independent consultant. Laura asks, what do you know about the survey samples? Do you have any information about who reaches the dead ends and why? Any comments on representativeness of only reaching internet users, and even more sophisticated if they're able to answer surveys after reaching a dead end?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. We do know that it is the internet, of course, but it is completely representative of the internet population. And we have some documents on this. So actually, we looked at about 120,000 people. This was just in the United States as one example, working with a group called ComScore, who measures the internet, and the correlation between who we get in terms of distribution and a variety of things is in there where it's near absolute convergence. So 0.997, if you're a stats person, 1-to-1, of course, is a mirror. So we essentially are a mirror of the internet in terms of who we can reach. So that means we'll have the same bias of the internet in certain countries. If it's lower economic or lower penetration, it's going to be somewhat more higher socioeconomic. It's going to be somewhat more urban. In terms of whether they are different people from who land on it, we have not found any evidence that people who land using this mechanism are any different. So everyone, depending on their background, can make errors of some nature and be exposed. And then, again, you'll see on our site some of our publications, like for the Trump election, we had surveyed, I think, 147,000 people, and we called the margin, the popular vote down to 0.1%. As well. So, when we've been able to compare against global, same with the Italian referendum, it seems to match quite well with the general population.
Great. Thank you very much, Eric. And we are all out of time for today's webinar. I know we didn't get to some of the questions. I think that's a sign of a great discussion. But please feel free to reach out to Eric via email and continue the discussion online. Like I said, this recording will be posted on the DME for Peace Media Gallery later this afternoon, and we encourage people to sort of engage in the comments section, and we'll do our best to make sure that your questions are answered. Once again, thank you very much to Eric and the team at RIWI for a great presentation today. Our next Thursday talk will be on May 11th, as Michael Sayer of Search for Common Ground will be leading a discussion on the evolution of collective impact. I hope you're going to be able to join us, and we'll have more information on the website soon. Once again, thank you very much, Eric. Thank you all for joining today's webinar, and I look forward to seeing you guys online very soon. Have a great rest of your week.